To start off with the conversations this morning, from the 9th to the 11th of September, Windhoek will be hosting the Global African Hydrogen Summit 2025. It will be taking place under the theme Ambition in Action, Fueling Africa's Green Industrial Revolution. Now, the summit will bring together government leaders, global investors, technology providers, and African stakeholders to accelerate partnerships and unlock the continent's potential when it comes to the green hydrogen space. For that conversation, we're now joined by Damian Howard, who is the Senior Vice President of Energy for DMG Events, a company organizing the upcoming Global African Hydrogen Summit that is taking place in Namibia. Mr. Howard, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Ndapewa, and good morning, Namibia.
All right. Perhaps we can start with the theme, Ambition in Action, Fueling Africa's Green Industrial Revolution. What does it mean? Talk to us as to how we'll be practicing this in practical terms.
In practical terms, well, in practice, you need nothing more than evidence. And what I'm showcasing here is just a small pellet of Namibian green ore, zero emissions.
Okay.
And so that is evidence in itself. But really, going back to your question, it, I suppose, starts with the fact that the Global African Hydrogen Summit is more than just an event. We see it as a movement to really unite and empower governments, industry, and civil society to drive tangible action. And so if we're looking at the inaugural summit last year, which was themed, funnily enough, from ambition to action, we were able to see a huge success off the back of that for a number of different reasons. Huge support from the government. We had over 25 ministers from across Africa and around the world. And we were really able to drive partnerships for and critical investment into key strategic projects, green projects, energy projects of national importance. But beyond that, since then, what we've seen, and the reason why we're under the theme of ambition in action this year, is we've seen the Dowris Green Hydrogen Village, which was incepted the end of last year, now moving from pilot phase to implementation. It actually has a groundbreaking ceremony at the end of this week with UNIDO, a very, very big moment in Namibia's development of green hydrogen. The High Iron project, of which the green iron ore pellet has come from, that was inaugurated by Her Excellency, your president, earlier in the year. And then, of course, beyond the borders of Namibia, we're seeing projects develop in South Africa, in Egypt, Morocco, Mauritania. And of course, the biggest announcement, I think, of all was earlier in the year, where the climate fund managers had shortlisted 7 countries around the world, including Namibia and Egypt and South Africa, to really be able to bid on huge portions of investment to drive industrialization programs. So this is what we see as ambition in action.
All right. Seeing that this is the second edition of the summit, what are some of your expectations?
So expectations with a sequel is always that it will be bigger and bolder. And I think, as I mentioned last year, there were challenges. There always are with an inaugural summit, because you're moving from proof of concept to delivery. But as I mentioned, the huge support we had from the government, the turnout of industry and governments from around the world, and also seeing that the dial move forward helped to establish. So I think for us really this year, what's more important than, I suppose, scale and size is really the quality of what we're delivering. And I would, if I had to unpack that and distill it into 3 key components that have been a focus for us, it's, first of all, we've seen so much volatility around the world, geopolitics, trade, economic challenges. So how can we adapt to that? The second point is, how can we make this year's summit much more commercially focused, much more business oriented, to really help stimulate the value chain? And third, I think, again, going back to those challenges, how can we really make the most of challenges? Because if you look at even the green hydrogen sector globally, it's still nascent. And what we find and what we see from other similar sectors, when you're creating a market, what's really critical is the stimulation of demand generation. So we're really looking at demand generation, end use, offtake. So I would say those three components have been critical backbone to this year's summit.
Yeah. Now, Namibia was chosen as the host country for this summit. How significant is Namibia's role when it comes to Africa's green hydrogen journey? I mean, green hydrogen is definitely a new term when it comes to, Namibia. I'm sure there are people out there who actually do not understand what green hydrogen is, but we've seen so many, events that are taking place, and also just education, people trying to, help the people understand, especially those in the marginalized communities in the rural areas, just helping them understand exactly what green hydrogen is. But when it comes to Namibia, what is one significant role that we play when it comes to, green hydrogen itself as an industry?
There are many. I mean, Namibia is the poster child for Africa, for sure. But a really, really interesting, somebody gave me a really interesting description of green hydrogen, and a fellow Namibian.
Okay.
And it was describing as so we know that oil runs cars, or diesel fuel runs cars, or gasoline runs cars. Essentially, green hydrogen is the future fuel. So it's the fuel that will replace what we use now.
In layman terms.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But also there's a big misconception, even myself up until 3 years ago, I thought it was similar to oil and gas that's extracted and produced. But green hydrogen is actually a technology. Aside from white hydrogen, which is naturally occurring in the ground and is extracted in a different way, it's a technology more than a produced fuel. But going back to your question, so when we initially derived the concept of the Global African Hydrogen Summit, we did engage with many African nations to host it. And we found with our Namibian stakeholders and partners that Namibia was the most ready at that time last year to be able to host such a summit. And we were, after last year's inaugural summit, invited back, despite there being 3 other very interested countries to host it. But I think what was really important for us was the development of the narrative. And I think a year later, we have seen much more progress in Namibia than anywhere else on the continent. And I think Namibia is a pioneer, it is a trailblazer, it is a leading light on the continent. And so I think on the one hand, there will be so much more to unpack in the second edition. It's not just a copy, paste, rinse and repeat of what we were discussing last year. There'll be so much more to investigate, from policy to standards and certification, to how we're engaging with civil society, to youth, to communities, to technologies, to financing and investment. And I suppose the other point on that is, the brother and sister nations across Africa can come and learn, can come and partner, and come and take those takeaways back to their nations and help establish and develop their green hydrogen economies as well. So
is Namibia still the host for the 3rd edition?
Well, at the moment, it's under an open bid, so we don't yet know. We hope that announcement will come out soon, but Namibia is definitely in the mix.
All right. Now, we do understand that many African countries are exploring hydrogen opportunities, but how can this summit help turn ambitions into bankable projects and also just perhaps real economic growth when it comes to the African continent?
That's a really great question, because there are so many strands to the Global African Hydrogen Summit. So, of course, we've got the strategic conference, the international exhibition, the innovation zone, and the youth program, and then many multilateral side events as well. But I think the one thing that stands out to me in terms of driving ambition to bankable projects, I love that phrase that you've teased out there, is really the project investment roundtables. So these are essentially closed-door structured meetings between developers and investors, but it is a journey. So last year, October, after the inaugural summit, we opened a 9-month call for projects. At the end of 9 months, we had received in excess of 67 projects from across the continent, and they then went through a period of review.
Yeah.
After that period of review, we shared back with all the developers how they could improve upon their project pitches. They realigned, and then it was down to our board of investors to grade all these projects. there were a very big portion of those projects that were actually micro businesses, SMEs and startups. And so they needed a little bit more of assistance, technical input and support. So for that group, we actually hosted a how to improve your bankable project pitch with a couple of our boutique consulting firms. And they then had the opportunity to update their projects. And so from 67, 32 went through to the final round. And then we have the shortlisted 13 projects actually in live meetings this week. And off the back of that, we know that there will be at least 3 or 4 announcements being made on the
this time around.
This time around.
All right.
So that I suppose moving from ambition to bankable projects is and also we're going to shine a light on the projects that went through that cycle last year.
Yeah.
Just a bit of a review and to see how they're developing.
All right. Lastly, Mr. Howard, perhaps before we let you go briefly, what message would you like to share with Namibians and also perhaps the wider African audience about the future of green hydrogen on the continent?
So I would say, I mean, I'm a passionate advocate that Namibia and Africa can be a world-class producer of green hydrogen. And as the African adage goes, you can go far if you go together. But beyond that, I suppose 4 key takeaways since I've been looking into this sector over the past 3 or 4 years. I would distill it into four points, really. Co-creation between partners is absolutely critical, whether that's governments, private, public sector, civil society. Harmonizing the balance between export versus local demand utilization is absolutely essential. And I would say local content, localization, valorization is essential in those early stage framework agreements. And the final point is we're investing today for the future, for the energy of tomorrow. The energy of tomorrow is for the youth. And so the youth have to be a critical stakeholder at those discussions today.
All right. Well, Mr. Howard, thank you so much for joining us. All the best with the rest of your stay in Namibia and all the best with the summit.
Thank you, Ndiapo. Appreciate it.
All right.